He had ruled the night for 500 years, feared by every vampire, untouchable by every law. And then a 29-year-old waitress with a cracked camera and a warm smile did what no enemy ever could. She made him want to be mortal. He had lived 542 years. He had watched empires rise and crumble to dust. He had outlasted wars, plagues, the slow turning of centuries. He had never once, not once, allowed himself to feel afraid. And yet, on a rooftop beneath a crimson moon, the most powerful vampire king in existence knelt in the ruins of a battlefield, cradling a dying human woman in his arms, whispering her name like it was the only prayer he had ever learned. How did a king who ruled the darkness end up completely undone by a girl with a camera and a warm smile? The answer began the way most world-altering things do, with a joke. Beneath the glittering surface of a city that never truly slept, there existed another world entirely. Nocturne City. To anyone passing through, it looks like any other sprawling metropolis. Neon lights bleeding into fog, jazz drifting from basement clubs. The hum of 1,000 lives lived in the dark, but if you knew where to look, past the velvet curtains, beneath the cobblestone alleyways, behind the doors marked with a single crimson sigil, you would find the other half of the city, the half that fed on shadows, the half that answered to one name, King Malik Thorn. To the human world, he was simply a wealthy, reclusive businessman, impeccably dressed, seldom seen by daylight. Quiet in the way that powerful men are quiet, not from shyness, from the certainty that when he finally chose to speak, every room would fall silent. To his own kind, he was something else entirely. Ruler of Nocturne, commander of the Vampire Council, a king who had outlived every advisor, every rival, every fragile thing he had ever dared to hold close. For 5 centuries that had been enough. Or so he told himself. Her name was Zuri Kane. 29 years old, long brown hair that caught the wind before she did, bright blue eyes that looked at the world the way most people look at something they are terrified of losing, with fierce, tender attention. She worked the late shift at Eternal Brew, a hidden cafe tucked at the boundary between the human world and Nocturne, where both kinds coexisted under a fragile, unspoken agreement. She had taken the waitress job 3 years ago, drawn by the peculiar beauty of a place that existed between 2 worlds. She photographed on her nights off, served crimson elixir on her nights on, and she had learned, quietly and without making a fuss about it, to treat every customer, human or otherwise, with the same unhurried warmth. She was a night photographer at heart, not the kind who chased celebrities or staged moments, the kind who wandered alone through quiet streets at 2 in the morning, pointing her lens at things no one else thought to notice. A moth resting on a lamppost, rain pooling in the hollow of a gargoyle's stone hand, light finding its way into places that had forgotten it existed. She had no idea she was doing the same thing to him. 7 years ago, King Malik had just finished a brutal Vampire Council meeting. His composure was intact, as always, but behind his eyes, the bloodlust had been building all evening. Quiet and relentless, the way pressure builds behind a closed door. He needed a crimson elixir. Zuri was working her shift, moving between tables with that unhurried ease of hers. She reached for the same glass at the same moment he did. She smiled at him, no hesitation. "Go ahead," she said simply. "You can have it, but you owe me the next one." Something inside him, something ancient and heavily armored, went very, very still. What happened next should have been impossible. Before she turned back to her other tables, she lifted the glass and took a small sip. Just a taste, the way you sample something unfamiliar. set it down with a satisfied little nod. Malik watched her, completely motionless, because a human who drank crimson elixir, even a drop, should have felt it immediately. Disorientation, dizziness, the sharp wrongness of blood that was never meant for human lips. She felt nothing. She simply picked up her tray, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, asked the table beside him if they needed anything else. He sat there in the warm amber glow of eternal brew, watching her move through a room full of shadows, and kept his discovery carefully hidden behind polished composure. But in the private chambers of a 500-year-old heart that had long since stopped expecting surprises, he knew she was different. He just didn't know yet what that difference would cost them both. From that evening on, without either of them quite deciding to, they became inseparable. He began coming in every Friday, no longer only for the elixir. She began setting his glass on the counter before he reached the door. Road trips through dark forests, rooftop conversations above the fog line. 7 years of Fridays, quiet and accumulating, each one adding weight to something neither of them had named. Everyone who saw them together assumed, quietly and naturally, that they were in love. Malik told himself every single time, "She is human, and I am the vampire king. This is nothing more than friendship." But she had no idea that everything was about to change. Stay with us. 7 years is a long time to keep a secret. Long enough to learn every small habit of another person. The way she always ordered her coffee too hot and drank it anyway. The way she hummed quietly when she was concentrating. The way she would lower her camera sometimes and simply look at the world with her bare eyes, as though the lens was not enough to hold everything she felt. 7 years is long enough to call something a tradition. Every Friday, without fail, they met at Moonlit Booth, a hidden underground alcove carved into the oldest stone quarter of Nocturne City. Candlelight pooled on worn wooden tables, the walls covered, floor to ceiling, with photographs Zuri had taken over the years, fog-draped bridges, moth wings, a child laughing in a city square at midnight, completely unaware of the shadows gathering at the edges. Malik had never told her that he had arranged for the owner to reserve that booth permanently. He paid quietly. He asked for nothing in return. It was, he told himself, simply a practical arrangement. He did not examine, too closely, why it mattered to him that she always had somewhere to return to. They had a ritual. She would arrive first, always, camera bag over one shoulder, slightly out of breath, as if the city itself had tried to slow her down and she had refused to let it. She would order 2 cups of Eternal Brew's black coffee, set his on the left side of the table, handle turned outward, exactly the way he liked it, without ever having been asked. He noticed he never mentioned it. She would spread her latest photographs across the table, glossy prints still faintly warm from development, and narrate each one with the enthusiasm of someone sharing something sacred. "This one," she said one evening, sliding a photograph toward him. It was a long exposure shot of Nocturne's oldest cathedral, taken just before dawn, the stone arches glowing with a strange inner light. "I was there for 3 hours waiting for this exact moment. The light only does this for about 40 seconds. Malik studied the photograph for a long time. She waits 3 hours, he thought, for 40 seconds of the right kind of light. He understood that completely. In a way he could not explain to her. He had been waiting 500 years. He was not entirely sure, anymore, what he was waiting for. "It's extraordinary," he said quietly. She looked up at him, surprised, not by the compliment, by something in his voice she had never quite heard before, something unguarded. She opened her mouth to ask about it. He reached for his coffee. The moment passed. "This is friendship," he reminded himself. Nothing more. She is my best friend. That is all she can ever be." It was Lord Jeremiah Voss who finally said aloud what everyone in Nocturne had been thinking in careful silence. The old advisor found Malik in the throne room late one evening, long after the council had dispersed, long after the candles had burned low. Voss moved slowly these days, his centuries weighing on him in ways they never seemed to weigh on the king. He set a single glass of crimson elixir on the armrest of the throne without a word. Then he said, very quietly, "Your Majesty, the council is watching." Malik did not look at him. "Let them watch." "You misunderstand me." Voss clasped his hands. "They are not watching you, they are watching her." A silence settled over the room, colder than stone. "She is a human," Voss continued carefully. "A human who spends every Friday night with the Vampire King, who wanders through Nocturne with a camera, photographing things she has no business seeing, who has, by all accounts, never once appeared frightened of you." He paused. "That last part troubles them most of all. She doesn't know what I am." "No." Voss turned to leave, then stopped. "But you know what she is to you, and I think, Your Majesty, that is precisely the problem. If you love a human, truly love her, the blood curse will wake, and when it wakes, it will not simply threaten her. It will consume everything you have built, every peace treaty, every life in this city, everything." He left the king alone in the dark, those words behind him, a glass of blood going cold. Malik sat there for a very long time. He thought about 40 seconds of impossible light on cathedral stone. He thought, "I have been waiting 500 years, and I am no longer certain I am waiting for something other than her." He buried the thought immediately, deep, behind 5 centuries of discipline and duty. But something had cracked, something small, irreversible. 3 weeks later, he nearly destroyed everything. He had come back from a difficult night. A rogue faction had attacked a border settlement. Malik had handled it personally. The bloodlust afterward was the worst it had been in decades. It moved through him like fire through old timber, burning away reason and restraint. He should have gone home. Instead, his feet carried him, as they always did in the end, to Zuri. She was in the back seat of his car, half asleep on the way home from a late-night shoot in the Northern Forest District. Foxes moving through frost-covered grass, she had told him earlier, her voice soft with exhaustion. One had come close enough to touch. She hadn't reached for it. She hadn't wanted to frighten it. Of course she hadn't. She fell asleep somewhere along the old forest road, her head tipping gradually, coming to rest against his shoulder. He did not move. The bloodlust surged. He felt it behind his eyes, that deep crimson pull that had ended lesser vampires, that ancient hunger that did not distinguish between enemy and beloved. His hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw locked. 5 centuries of control, he told himself. 5 centuries. Her breathing was slow and even against his arm. She smelled of pine needles and cold air and something else, something warm and particular and entirely her own, something he had never allowed himself to name. Then, in her sleep, she shifted, lifted her hand and placed it, soft and unhesitating, against his jaw. "Are you okay?" she murmured, still half in a dream. Not even fully awake, she simply knew, somehow, that something was wrong, and she reached for him anyway. The bloodlust went completely quiet, just like that, as if it had never been. He sat in the dark, her hand warm against his face, and felt something crack open inside him, wider than he had ever allowed. He thought of the blood curse, he thought of Voss's words, he thought of every fragile thing he had outlived, And for the first time in 542 years, the Vampire King was genuinely, profoundly afraid. Not of the curse, not of the council, of losing her. The Vampire Council convened 3 days later. Malik stood before them, stone-faced, immovable, as the decree was formally read aloud. The king must choose a vampire queen within 1 year. Failure to comply will trigger a succession crisis. The ancient laws are clear. Around the long obsidian table, faces watched him with varying degrees of expectation and calculation. One face watched him with something else entirely. Countess Amara Valith, centuries old, possessed of an ambition so vast it seemed to generate its own gravity. She smiled at him from across the table. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had already decided how a story ended, and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. "A year is generous," she said softly. "The king has always been decisive. I'm certain he already knows who the right choice is." Her eyes moved, just once, briefly, deliberately, toward the entrance of the council chamber, where, through the tall arched windows, a figure was visible on the street below. Zuri, camera raised, photographing the building's stone gargoyles in the last cold light of evening, completely unaware that 20 pairs of eyes had just followed Amara's gaze to find her. Malik did not react. He had learned to hold very still under pressure. But something moved behind his eyes, something protective and fierce, and Amara saw it, and smiled wider. Just when he thought he could protect her from the darkness he ruled, the darkness had already found her name. Stay close, because what happens next between these two will break your heart before it heals it. He chose the rooftop because it was the only place in Nocturne City where you could stand at the center of everything and still feel completely alone. It was their rooftop. Neither had ever said so, but both of them knew it. 6 floors above the Old Stone District, above the fog and the jazz and the quiet, complicated machinery of 2 worlds pretending to coexist in peace. Up here the air was colder. The neon bled upward in soft columns of violet and gold, and the moon, always a deep, bruised crimson over Nocturne, hung low and close, as if it too had been waiting for something. Zuri arrived first. She always arrived first. She was sitting on the low stone parapet when he got there, legs dangling over the edge, the casual fearlessness that had always both alarmed and undone him. Her camera rested in her lap, but she wasn't shooting. She was simply looking out over the city with that bare-eyed attention of hers. The way she looked when the lens wasn't enough. "You're late," she said, without turning around. "I'm never late." He sat beside her. "The world adjusts." She laughed, small and warm, moving through the cold air like something alive. They sat in easy silence for a while, the way people do when they have run out of things they need to say, and discovered, somewhere along the way, that the silence itself is a kind of conversation. Below them, Nocturne breathed. Above them, the crimson moon held still. Then Zuri sighed, long and slow and faintly rueful. "Why is dating so exhausting?" she said, to no one in particular. "Maybe I should just marry my best friend. At least I know what I'm getting." Malik looked at her sideways. "That actually sounds reasonable," he said. She rolled her eyes. Silence stretched between them, easy, familiar. And then, because he was 542 years old, and apparently still capable of the specific foolishness that only surfaces when someone means too much, he said it. "Fine, marry me." He meant it as a joke. He had been meaning it for years. Zuri did not laugh. She always laughed at his dry humor, a quick, bright sound, reflexive and genuine. It was one of the things he had catalogued without meaning to, over 7 years of Fridays. She didn't laugh. She went very still. The camera stilled in her hands, the city continued below them, indifferent, and Zuri Kane, brave, fearless at the edge of rooftops Zuri, sat in absolute silence for a moment that felt considerably longer than it was. Then she said, very quietly, "I thought you'd never ask." Malik turned to look at her fully. Her voice had been soft, almost careful, as if she had been holding the words somewhere for a long time and was only now, with great deliberateness, setting them down. She met his eyes, and everything he thought he knew about the last 7 years quietly rearranged itself. "I've been serious for a long time," she said. Her chin was up, her voice was steady, but her hands had tightened around the camera until her knuckles paled. "I've loved you for years, Malik, you absolute idiot." The cold air between them changed texture entirely. He said nothing. He was, for perhaps the first time in 5 centuries, completely without words. She exhaled, looked back out at the city. "And before you say anything," her voice dropped lower, "I know what you are. I've known since year 3. She didn't look at him. "I followed you one night. You'd been so distracted, so unlike yourself, and I was worried, so I followed you, and I saw you." A pause. "I saw everything." Year 3, he calculated in an instant, with the precise clarity of someone measuring impact. 4 years. She had known for 4 years. She had sat across from him at moonlit booth, ordered his coffee with the handle turned outward, fallen asleep against his shoulder on dark forest roads. She had known, and she had stayed. She had stayed. "I wasn't frightened," she said quietly. "Not of what you were. I was frightened of what would happen if you found out that I knew. I thought." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I thought you'd disappear, pull away, decide I wasn't safe to be near anymore, and losing you was the thing I was most afraid of, more than anything else." He understood that fear with his entire body. Because it was his fear too, wearing a different face. He felt the truth rising in him, something he had been burying for 7 years, breaking the surface at last, and he said it because there was nothing left to say. "The cruelest truth," he began, his voice lower than she had ever heard it, "is that I have loved you too, since the very beginning, since you handed me a glass of blood in a cafe and smiled like it was nothing." The words came slowly, each one carrying weight. "But I kept it buried, because if it was real, if I allowed myself to truly love you, the blood curse would wake." He looked out at the city below, at all those lights, all those lives. "The blood curse does not simply take me, Zuri. If the Vampire King loves a human, truly loves her, his bloodlust becomes uncontrollable, his judgment gone, his kingdom crumbling within a year. Every peace treaty I have built, every life in this city, human and vampire both." His voice was barely above a whisper. "So I told myself it was friendship, that every Friday, every road trip, every photograph between a best friend and a vampire king was simply that, friendship, nothing more. I told myself that for 7 years." Zuri was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was very steady. "You've been protecting everyone," she said, "from your own heart." Not a question. He said nothing, which was, in its way, the loudest answer he had ever given. The rooftop turned colder than it had been all night. Somewhere in the darkness below, something shifted. A disturbance in the air, too present to ignore. Neither of them noticed. They were looking at each other, for the first time without armor. The weight of 7 years of unspoken truth just settling between them. When the sound came, a low, resonant beat of wings, not one pair, many. And in that moment, she realized the terrible truth, that loving him had never been the dangerous thing. The dangerous thing was that someone else had been watching them love each other all along. Hold on, because everything they just confessed is about to be tested in the most devastating way imaginable. They came from the north, out of the dark above the fog line, a sound like thunder that had learned to breathe. Dozens of them, wings spanning wide against the crimson moon, rogue vampires moving in formation with the cold, precise discipline of soldiers who had been waiting a long time for exactly this moment. At their center, descending in a slow, deliberate spiral, was Countess Amara Valith. She landed on the parapet 10 feet from where they stood. Her gown was the color of old blood. Her eyes were ancient, entirely without warmth. "Kill the human," she said, not to Malik, but to the army behind her, with the tone of someone issuing a routine instruction. Once she is gone, the king returns to what he was. A pause, elegant, poisonous. What he should be. For a half-second, the rooftop hung in absolute stillness. Then the world exploded. Malik moved first, one fluid motion, no hesitation. The transformation came instantly. Massive black wings spread wide, a wall of darkness between Zuri and the descending swarm. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of 5 centuries without a single raised syllable. "Touch her," he said, "and I will remind every one of you why this city answers to my name." The battle erupted across the rooftop and into the sky. Zuri did not run. She raised her camera. Old reflex, find the light, chase it, the dawn blood in her veins. That rare inheritance she had never fully understood, responded to the chaos the way it always did in darkness. It rose, it moved through her like sunrise through fog. When she pressed the shutter, the flash that erupted from the lens was not ordinary light. It was dawn, compressed and weaponized, a burst of radiance that hit the nearest attackers like a physical blow, staggering them, burning at their edges. She had always wondered why her photographs seemed to glow differently than anyone else's. She understood now. Above her, the Vampire King fought with the ferocity of something that had been leashed for a long time and had finally let go. He moved through the swarm like weather, decisive, devastating. But there were so many of them, and Amara, hovering at the periphery, was waiting. She struck when his back was turned. The cursed blade caught him across the side, a wound that would have been minor from an ordinary weapon. But this blade had been made for one purpose, to find the weakness in old magic and widen it. Malik staggered. The black wings faltered. He caught himself on the parapet, one hand pressed to stone. The steadiness in his eyes flickered. Zuri was at his side before he finished falling. She caught him the way he had once sat motionless in a dark car, carefully, like something that mattered beyond all calculation. "Malik!" Her hands were on his face, the way you hold something you are terrified of dropping. His skin was cold. The wound at his side was spreading. Darkness moving under his skin like ink through water. "Look at me." His eyes found hers, present, barely. He thought, "She is holding my face. This is the last thing I want to see." He thought, "I would give up every year of the 542 to keep her safe from this moment." She thought, "I have known what he was for 4 years. I have known what I was to him for longer than that." She thought, "I should be frightened." She was not frightened. "I know what I have to do," she said. His hand closed around her wrist. "No, whatever you're thinking, I'm your true mate." She said it plainly, the way she said everything true and important, like stating the direction of the light. "My dawn blood can heal this, the wound, the curse, everything Amara came here to wake. It could cost you your life. It might." "Zuri!" You have been protecting everyone from your own heart for 500 years. Her voice did not shake. Let me protect you, just this once. I forbid it. A silence. Then, despite everything, the battle still erupting around them, the cursed wound spreading toward his heart, she almost smiled. You've never been able to forbid me anything, she said softly. Not once, in 7 years, not even the first time you tried, when we were just a vampire king and his best friend who hadn't figured out yet what they were to each other. He knew she was right. He had known it since the first Friday. She moved before he could stop her. A quick, clean motion. The wound on her wrist opened, and what came out was not quite ordinary blood. It was warmer than that, luminous, faintly golden at the edges. The way the sky looks in the 30 seconds before sunrise, when the darkness doesn't know yet that it's already losing. Dawn blood. She pressed her wrist to his wound. The effect was immediate, light cascading outward from the point of contact. Not the controlled burst of her camera flash, something older, unconditional. It moved through him the way her touch had moved through him on that dark forest road. The bloodlust, the curse, the spreading darkness of the blade, all of it going quiet, all of it stilled. The black wings steadied. The crimson in his eyes deepened, then shifted. Something new moved through them, something that had never appeared in 542 years of armored solitude. Warmth. But Zuri's breath had gone shallow. Her free hand found his shoulder. Her knuckles paled. The same way they had tightened around her camera on this very rooftop when she finally said the words she had been holding for years. Her weight shifted against him. He caught her the way he had always been going to, the way the story had always been moving toward. Both of them holding on. Amara dove. Malik raised one wing, shielding Zuri completely, and turned to face the Countess with the quiet gravity of a king who had nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. Zuri's eyes were closing. Hey, she murmured, her hand still pressed to his side. I need you to... I know, he said, barely above a whisper. I know what I have to do. Lord Voss appeared at the rooftop entrance then, as if he had been waiting in the margins of this particular story for exactly this moment. He looked at the two of them and spoke the words written into the oldest laws of Nocturne, long before anyone living could remember. Your Majesty, you must choose, turn her, and she lives, but she is no longer herself, or surrender your immortality and your throne, and she heals and remains who she is. There is no third option. The laws are absolute. The rooftop went silent. The army held its position. Even Amara, hovering at the edge, went still, because a king about to make an impossible choice commands even an enemy's attention. Malik looked down at Zuri. Her camera had fallen 6 inches away. Its lens was cracked but intact, still pointed, even now, toward the light. He had been waiting 500 years. He finally knew what he had been waiting for. For the first time in decades, he knew what he had to do. And so did she. Don't look away now. The choice he makes in the next moment will change both their worlds forever. He did not hesitate. 542 years of waiting. And in the end, the decision took no time at all. It arrived not like a calculation, not like the measured, strategic thinking that had governed every choice he'd made for 5 centuries, but like something already known, simply, finally, acknowledged. I choose to give up everything, he said. His voice was steady. His eyes were on Zuri's face, pale and still against the stone. Immortality means nothing without her. Lord Voss bowed his head. Amara, hovering at the edge of the rooftop, let out a sound of cold contempt. Then you are a fool, she said. You are throwing away 500 years. I am keeping the only thing that ever mattered. He reached down, took Zuri's hand, the one still faintly luminous with dawn blood, and he laced his fingers through hers, held them there. The choice made, the sacrifice given, what happened next? None of them had seen written in the old laws. Because the old laws had been written by those who believed that love and power could not coexist, that one always devoured the other. They had not accounted for a true mate. They had not accounted for Dawnblood meeting a freely chosen sacrifice. The light came from both of them at once, from the exact point where his surrender and her gift had found each other. A radiance that was neither golden nor crimson, but something entirely new, something that had no name yet, because it had never existed before this moment. It moved across the rooftop like a wave, gentle, absolute. Where it touched the rogue vampires, the aggression simply drained out of them. The way a fever breaks, several landed, confused, on the parapet stone. Several flew quietly away into the dark. When the light reached Amara, she screamed once. Then she was gone. Not destroyed, simply finished. Her ambition had fed entirely on the blood curse. Without the curse, there was nothing left to sustain her. She fell away into the dark of Nocturne and did not return. The sky cleared. The crimson moon, for the first time in living memory, shifted just slightly, just enough, toward gold. Zuri woke slowly, the way dawn comes, first a suggestion, then a certainty. She was lying on her back on the rooftop stone, her head in Malik's lap. The battle was over. The fog had settled back into the streets below. Somewhere in the city, a low, wondering murmur was spreading outward through both halves of Nocturne. The sound of two worlds beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed. Malik was looking down at her. His wings were folded, or at rest. She had never been entirely sure how that worked. His eyes, for the first time since she had known him, were not crimson. They were a deep, warm brown, unhidden. She looked at them for a long moment. "You gave it up," she said. "Yes." She was quiet, turning that over. Then, "How do you feel?" He considered this with the unhurried seriousness he gave to most things. That particular attention that had first caught her notice 7 years ago, in the amber light of a cafe. "I feel," he said slowly, "a heartbeat." A pause. "Mine. I had forgotten what that felt like." Zuri reached up, pressed her palm flat against his chest, the way she did everything that mattered, without asking. She felt it too, steady and real, beneath 5 centuries of armor that had finally come down. "Good," she said softly. "That means you're here." Lord Voss approached quietly, carrying Zuri's camera with the careful reverence of someone handling something sacred. The lens was cracked, as it had been since the battle, but the camera itself was intact. He set it beside her without a word, stepped back. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. "The crack runs right through the center of the lens," she said. "I know, I'm sorry." "Don't be." She tilted it toward the sky, looked through the viewfinder anyway. The crack split everything into 2 halves, dark on one side, that strange new gold on the other. "It's actually beautiful. I've been photographing Nocturne for 7 years. I don't think I've ever seen it look like this." He thought, she sees beauty in broken things. He thought, she always has. She saw it in me, 4 years before I ever showed it to her. "What happens now?" she asked. Voss answered from a respectful distance, his old voice carrying the quiet weight of centuries. "The blood curse is broken, not suppressed, broken. The law that forbade a vampire king from loving a human was written to prevent exactly what just happened. He paused. It did not succeed. Nocturne has not seen both worlds stand as equals in its entire history. It will require time, patience, new law. Malik looked at him steadily. Then we begin. Voss, who had served 5 centuries of kings and had never once knelt without being required to, knelt. Nocturne now belongs to love, both of its halves. They stayed on the rooftop until the city had fully settled. Until the murmur had become celebration. Torches in the human quarter, lights appearing one by one in the windows of the vampire district. Curious, tentative, slowly, carefully hopeful. Neither of them said very much. They had spent 7 years filling silence with conversation. It turned out that a different kind of silence needed no filling at all. At some point, Zuri stood, picked up her camera, walked to the edge of the parapet, the same edge where she had sat earlier that evening, legs dangling, wondering why love was so exhausting, and raised the cracked lens to the changing sky. Malik stood beside her. She pressed the shutter. The flash was soft, not the weaponized light of battle, just light, gentle and habitual and hers. It caught the gold threading through the moon, scattered it across the rooftop stones, and for one long second, everything above and below them glowed. She lowered the camera, looked at the image on the small screen. 2 figures at the edge of a rooftop, a city behind them, both halves visible, a sky mid-transformation, still partly dark, but threaded all through with gold that had no business being there. And was there anyway? She showed it to him without a word. He looked at it for a long time. "This one," he said quietly. The same words she had said 7 years ago, sliding a cathedral photograph across a candlelit table, is extraordinary. She smiled. The rooftop felt different now. The whole city felt different. As though something that had been held very tightly for a very long time had been, at last, allowed to open. Stay with us, because the most beautiful part of their story is still just ahead. 3 months after the night, the sky changed over Nocturne. The rooftop garden grew back. That surprised no one more than Malik. He had not planted it. He had not asked for it. He simply noticed. One Tuesday morning, that something green was pushing up through the cracks in the parapet stone where the battle had scorched everything black. Small and stubborn, entirely unbothered by what the stone had been through. He mentioned it to Zuri. She came the following Friday with a packet of wildflower seeds and a small clay pot from the market on the human side of the city. Pressing the soil between her fingers with the focused quiet she brought to everything she cared about. "See," she said, without looking up. "Things grow back. They always do. They just need someone to notice." He thought, "I have been waiting 5 centuries to be noticed." He thought, "She has been noticing since the very beginning." That evening, as the sun moved toward the horizon and the sky above Nocturne began its nightly ritual, crimson deepening first, then the threading gold moving in from the east, the 2 colors neither fighting nor surrendering, simply learning to share the sky, Malik knelt on the rooftop. Not in ruins this time. In a garden. Small, improbable, entirely alive, he held no ring. He had spent several days considering this and decided, in the end, that what he wanted to offer her was not a stone or a setting, but simply himself, which was, by now, considerably less than what he had been, and considerably more. "Zuri Kane," he said. She looked up from the wildflowers. He was not smiling, he was, as he had been the night everything changed, entirely, unguardedly serious. "This time," he said quietly, "I am not joking. Will you marry me?" She looked at him for a long moment. her hands still in the soil, her camera resting against the parapet, its cracked lens catching the last of the fading light, still cracked, still hers, still finding beauty in the fracture lines. What began as a joke, a careless, half-meant "marry me" on a cold rooftop, between a best friend and a vampire king who had been in love for 7 years and too afraid to say so, had become, in the end, the truest thing either of them had ever said. "Finally," she said softly. And she was crying, just a little, just enough. "You absolute idiot." They married on the same rooftop, on a Friday, at the hour when the city was just beginning to wake. Both halves of Nocturne were invited. Most of them came. Lord Voss cried quietly, and did not apologize for it. The moonlit booth was reserved, as it had always been. But now the walls held one new photograph, framed in plain wood, hung in the center, 2 figures at the edge of a rooftop, a mid-transformation sky behind them, gold threading through the dark. Malik still kept a glass of crimson elixir on the left side of the table, handle turned outward. Zuri still arrived first. The difference was that now, when she spread her photographs across the table, he leaned in close and said, "This one, the light on the bridge here. How long did you wait?" And she said, every time, without embarrassment, however long it took. He was learning, slowly and with the patience of someone reacquainting himself with time as a finite thing, what it meant to live inside a single life rather than stretched across centuries. It was smaller than he had expected. It was warmer than he had expected. He had not known, before her, that those 2 things could be the same. Every morning now, very early, before the human quarter started its coffee and its newspapers, before the vampire district closed its shutters against the approaching day, the 2 of them stood at the parapet edge together. No cameras, no council business, no agenda. Just 2 people watching the sky learn, over and over, how to let the gold in, and she finally understood. Not the vampires, not the ancient laws, not the politics of 2 worlds finding their careful peace, but the simpler, older thing beneath all of it, that the greatest courage is not the kind that carries a weapon. It is the kind that reaches across the dark toward another person and says, "I see you. I have always seen you. And I am not going anywhere." This story reminds us of something that has nothing to do with vampires or curses or kingdoms. It reminds us that the loneliest feeling in the world is not being alone. It is being unseen, standing in a room full of people, or sitting in a house that used to be full and is quieter now, and feeling as though the most real parts of you have gone too long without being witnessed. It reminds us that being truly seen is almost never a grand gesture. It is the person who remembers how you take your coffee, who notices the things no one else thinks to notice, who reaches for you in the dark before they are even fully awake, simply because something in them knows you need it. If you are living more quietly these days, if the Friday evenings look different than they used to, if there are chairs at your table that belong to someone who is no longer there, know this: the impulse to keep showing up, to notice the small and stubborn green things growing back through the cracks, to reach towards someone with whatever you have left. That impulse is not foolishness. It is the bravest thing there is. Maybe this week, you find an old photograph tucked in a drawer, slightly worn at the edges, the colors a little faded, and you set it somewhere you can see it from your chair, and you say their name out loud, just once, to the quiet kitchen, not because it fixes anything, but because saying it means they are still part of your story. And they are. They always will be. The light gets in, even through the cracked places. especially through the cracked places. This vampire tale was born from a real human soul, full of emotion, contradiction, and longing. AI was merely a companion who helped arrange the words to be as beautiful and clear as possible. That's why you'll find it not only terrifying, but also very human.